ago, the Dialogue Guys. I don't know if you saw today that was my house, that one of the girls is a teenager that was released. She never heard of it. And I'm like, it's probably sick mentally, because her name is young.
I started to see a couple snippets of things that they were talking about. How are you? How are you doing?
We just placed the sticker of Hanukkah and a soccer field in the hallway. So next time you come in London, it's funny, I decorated I keep saying we. I decorated it's like always we, but it's like just me. But it's like, I decorated the lobby today. One of the kids walked in and said, "Oh, whose birthday it is?" And I thought it was so cute. So I told him it's Hanukkah. He's like, Hanukkah. That was very cute.
Quick question. When did you serve in the Army?
2005, 2008. So I was during my commander course. The last day, that was the day that we went to Gaza. And we all went to Gaza from the beginning of the second war. And it was at Camp Joe where most of the hostages were coming in from Gaza.
And your official job title is Director of
Jewish.
That's what I call it. When I'm introducing you, I'm introducing you correctly. We'll get started in about 2 minutes. Just let any stragglers come in.
Hello, sir.
Erev Tov, everybody. Welcome to our Voices of Israel program. We're very excited to be here today and have three great speakers with to talk with you today. I know after the October 7th attacks, there was a lot of emotion and a lot of chaos and a lot of feelings that were going around. And what we wanted to try to do here was to give voice to some people who have a little more experience about it and talk about their experiences in Israel and in Gaza to help give us a little more context and background about the situation and what is going on there. So that's how this kind of came about. So we're very grateful to our speakers today for coming to speak with us. Here's the format. I'm going to try, this is hard for me as a rabbi to just say, I'm going to talk for a little bit and then stop. So I'm going to try really hard. The format for today is we're going to let each of our speakers talk for about 15 minutes. And I'll try to give you guys a 5-minute warning when you guys are getting there. And then we'll leave some time at the end for questions if you guys have any. So if you have questions, you can take notes. I know we're in the chapel, but it's not Shabbat, so you can write it down if you want. Take out your phone and write it down and hold on to your questions, and then we'll be able to ask them at the end. So I'm just briefly going to introduce our speakers. First is Tzlil McDonald. She was in the IDF from 2005 to 2008, and then moved here to Birmingham with her husband and children last summer. So we're glad to have you guys here. It's been wonderful. And she is also now the Director of Jewish Life at the LJCC, so we're glad to have her speak in that capacity as well. Second, I think you guys should know Asaf, who grew up here and then was in the IDF in 2014, correct?
Yeah. Before and after.
Before and after.
Also in 2014.
And finally, we'll hear from Barry, who was visiting his daughter in Israel on October 7th when the attacks happened, and be able to hear a little bit of first-person account from him while we were there. So I'm going to try to stop. I'm going to hand it over to Tzlil, and she'll start us off this evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm first going to address the question that probably everyone wonder, how did I end up here? So about 10 years ago, I came to Montgomery, Alabama, as the Israeli shlicha. Shlicha is an emissary in Hebrew. Those are representative of the state of Israel that come to Jewish community around the world, mostly in North America, to educate about Israel, to connect to the Jewish community in Israel, and pretty much create a living bridge between our communities. And so I came here in 2013 after I graduated from Ben-Gurion University, and I met my husband in the synagogue of Agudat Israel, for those of you who know the community a little bit. We both went back to Israel, lived in Ramat Gan for a little bit, and my husband did Masa program, which is a long extended period of time where Jewish American can come and volunteer, work, or intern, or study, or teach. And my husband interned for 2 startups, one in Tel Aviv, one in Herzliya. And in 2015, we both came back to America. And I worked for the Jewish Federation of Central Alabama, was the executive director. And 2 years ago, we moved to Metairie, Louisiana, and came back here in the end of July. So just in a nutshell, my service in the IDF, I was a combat soldier in the engineering corps, is a co-ed unit where men and women serve together. Something that I really love to see about seeing in this operation is that a lot of women are in the front of the IDF. We have women rescuing hostages in helicopters. We have units of 669 that this is a rescue mission that come in and bring injured soldier back to the hospital in Israel. So a lot of women are serving in there. There's incredible stories of heroism in this operation, and I'm sure that Asaf and also my friend over here will be able to share about it. And when I was in a commander course in 2006, the last day of my commander course, actually, we were in the field, and Gilad Shalit was kidnapped. So when he was kidnapped, me and my entire battalion, we jumped to Gaza and served over there. I was in Kerem Shalom for the first 2 months of the war, and that's where the point where most of the hostages right now are being entered from Gaza to Israel. So to see those images, and it's something that can touch very meaningful, knowing what's going on in Gaza, what's going on in Israel. As an Israeli living in America, I'm originally from Beersheba, and most of my family is still in Beersheba, and for the past 20 years, they have been constantly suffering from rockets hitting. And also me living there as a student and experiencing that. And I think this is something that we barely hear, but unfortunately, this operation hasn't been much rocket. I'm saying much, but even experiencing one rocket where you have, my parents are lucky because they have 1 minute to run to the shelter, and they have a shelter in their house. So luckily they don't have to run in the stairs or go outside to a public shelter and injure. We don't hear a lot about that, but that's also something that, very impact people's life. I don't know if you heard, but unfortunately, about a few weeks ago, a 9-year-old girl had a heart attack because she was terrified from the siren. So I have friends that are kids that are potty trained has accident at night because they're terrified. And this is something that I try to explain people, the horror that people right now going through, how it's impact their life, how it's something that unfortunately didn't just happen on October 7. It didn't start in October 7, it started long before. Different operations, I think Asaf can also talk about it and touch that, but this is something that people that are living there and experiencing day-to-day life. And unfortunately, there was something terrible that happened, but they're using it against us and holding our people. So it's a constant battle. What we do at the Levite Jewish Community Center, first of all, we're about bringing people together, especially in time of need. So I don't know if you visited, but I invite you to come and visit us. We created something, we call it the living room of the J, where people, as the war started, we want to create a space where people can come together, can talk, can share their feelings, get support. So there's coffee and there's snacks there where you can come and sit down at the table. And, we saw that people really use this space. So we left it. So we hold sometimes even meetings over there as a staff, or when we have someone comes in for a meeting, we decide to go outside and meet them at the lobby where we can all be together. And it encourages our community to also come together and show up. Another things that we did, and something amazing that happened, that a lot of businesses and organizations and churches and friends send us cooked meal for us sometimes and send it to the J and bring baked goods. So people are contributing to this living room. And it's really amazing about how we can all come together and support each other. Another things that we did is created a webpage where you can also go to lgcc.org and you can read about the constant situation in Israel, get resources that are updated daily about what's going on in Israel, and how to cope with the situation, because it's a very challenging situation, and some of us don't even know how to talk about it or talk with our children about it. So there's a lot of information for you to go there and see. A lot of lay leaders from our, either people that are alumni of the JCC or still very involved in our community, going out to churches and other groups of people and educating about the situation, what's going on in Israel, what is Hamas, how this conflict happened, what happened in the history in the past. And we not only educating about what's going on in Israel, but giving the perspective of Israel, sharing the stories of people that lives there. What does it mean to run to the shelter, where the kibbutzes are, where they're located, about what happened in each kibbutz, because the stories that they read online not necessarily showing the full perspective on what happened, and unfortunately there's a lot of misleading information, and that's what we try to do, to meet with people, but also a lot of non-Jewish individuals, we encouraging them out, not just to show up, but also to speak up for Jewish people. Since the Holocaust, as a granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor, I'll say that this has been the most terrible attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. The amount of casualty is devastating. And the horror that how people were raped, people were abused, people were tortured. Unfortunately, the stories are very heartbreaking, and we don't yet know the amount of the tragedy that happened. We learn every day more and more about what happened, and it's very hard to cope with that. So what we do in those meetings is also telling people that if in the Holocaust Jewish people felt alone, we telling people, show up to your Jewish friends, talk to them, tell them that you're there for him, help them, share it with your family, with your neighbors, with your colleagues at work. And those things are something that a lot of people don't know how to do. So when we meet with people and we put a lot of time just for people to ask questions, so hopefully we'll have enough time for you to ask questions about what you want to know about what's going on in Israel. But, okay, sorry. And I think those meetings that we do with people, we also share with them about the humanitarian aid that we are helping to support through the Birmingham Jewish Federation Emergency Campaign. So if you do want to contribute and you want to see where the money goes and what we do in Israel or here in our Jewish community, you can also go to our website and see. But, part of the LJCC is we have a preschool in our community. We have, our neighbor next door is the Jewish Day School, NME Miles. So one thing that we did also to up the security for effort in our community. So we have 2 guard officers in-house all the time, making sure that our organization is safe and our people can continue and can come and exercise and be together in the community, that the children will be able to study and, in a safe way, especially with the rise in anti-Semitism around the world and the hatred toward the Jewish community. It's something that we're very concerned about. And we're working there with our representative of security and the police officers and Jeff Brown, which is the appointed security chief here in Birmingham, that he works with us to make sure that we will be safe. And that's one thing that we do. But mainly is if you would like us to come to your work or to your organization, or you have neighbors that their churches would like to ask some questions, we'd be happy to come and meet with them. We had several very powerful evening and meetings with individuals that were very generously decided to support the campaign. And I think, maybe Purple correct me, but I think we had about more than $120,000 that was raised through those meetings, and we continue to go to other groups. But there's so many people that joining us in this effort and are coming together because this is a critical time. This is where we need, as a Jewish community, come together to share the story of Israel, tell what's really going on in Israel, that we will be able, by Zrat Hashem, to bring all the hostages back until the last of them, no matter if it's male, children, women, elderly, and this is ongoing, and it's going to be for a long run. But this is something that, as an Israeli, give me a lot of hope and pride that I'm still able to contribute, being so far away. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
My name is Asaf Stein. I suppose I'll start with just a little bit for context purposes about me and my background. I'll try to keep it short. And some of my experiences, and that way we can leave some more time for questions. So I was born in Israel, in a little moshav in the middle of nowhere, the Arava, on the Jordanian border. When I was 5, we moved to the States, so I pretty much grew up in Birmingham, where my father was originally from. And when I was, let's say, 18, 19, I really began to just, look into my own identity. Why am I Jewish? What's important to me? That in the context of history, and I really came to appreciate the rare and unique nature of the state of Israel. But there were Jews in the land of Israel, and that they had control and self-determination. Moreover, they had an army, which was extremely rare. And so with a long view of history, you could see that, wow, this incredible moment I get to participate in. What an honor. Who am I to receive such an honor? I have to be a part of it. Couldn't pass up that opportunity, especially with a background having been born there. And so really it was pretty striking for me. Had you asked me when I was 18, would I ever go back, I would have thought you were crazy. And by 19, I was set on it. And so after a volunteer trip to Israel, I decided I'm not going to volunteer anymore. I'm going to come back to serve in the Army. So I continued my undergraduate degree at UAB. The plan was afterwards to move back to Israel, join the Army, and to live. But I got an opportunity to do a master's degree. So I said, okay, it's a master's degree, I can't pass it up. I'll do the master's degree, and then I'll go. Started doing a master's degree. Got an opportunity to do a PhD. Okay, I can't pass up a PhD. Okay, 3 years they promised me. It didn't turn out to be 3 years. I can go after that. 10 years basically after I begun my journey to understand the land of Israel and how I fit into it, after I graduated from UAB with my PhD, finally, I dropped everything I was doing in terms of my trajectory with academic research and made Aliyah Chazara to Israel. That was in 2012. And my brother was already a woman soldier at the time. And he lived in Kibbutz Nir Yitzchak. It's Otef Aza. It's Gaza envelope. The communities around Gaza. And so he was already living there. So I lived with him for a few months before the Army. I also lived with everybody who's familiar with the Divani family. I lived with them for a while, also before the Army. And at the ripe old age of 28, I finally was able to enlist in the Israeli Army. And I served in the Golani Brigade. And just a quick story, sort of to give you as a reference for today. So the enlistment was in 2013. And so after a year and a half of living in Israel, I was already in the Army. I was given permission to take almost a 1 month leave in the States. It had been the first time I came back to the States since I moved back to Israel. And things were heating up with Gaza, also with Hezbollah, and I told my commander, I don't know if I want to go on this leave. I think things seem like they're heating up. Go. What's the problem? Go. You'll be fine. It's nothing. So I go. I'm here for about 2 days, and things start heating up even more. And so I'm constantly in contact with my buddies in my unit. And they say we were on the Syrian border doing operations on the Syrian border at the time. And for you geography experts, Syria is very far from Gaza in terms of Israeli geography. And so he says to me, they're mobilizing our unit to Gaza. Okay, so that's something rare. That you don't just take somebody off an operational unit doing counterterrorism operations on one border and move them somewhere. It doesn't happen. So it's very serious. So instead of being in the States for a month, I was there for 2 days. And so I tried to get the first flight back. Get the first flight back, already there's more rockets by the time I get there. I landed in Ben Gurion 3 days after I left. And Iron Dome is intercepting rockets overhead. My kibbutz family picks me up. I call my commander. He says, "We're not going tomorrow. We're not going today. Just come tomorrow morning." So I go down there the following morning, and I arrived at the staging area 3 days before the Gaza invasion. So that would be Tzuk Eitan in 2014. How many people are familiar with Israeli geography? So our staging area is Nachal Oz, and across from Nachal Oz is a neighborhood in Gaza City called Sajaiya. And so that was our sector. And so we basically fought inside these neighborhoods of Gaza City for the better part of a month. And the rest is really history. They had a ceasefire, which Hamas broke then. They're breaking now, as they usually do. And so when the October 7th massacre happened, obviously it returned me to the time where I was here and about to go back. And should I go back again? No, it's very different. Then I was single and in active military, and now I'm not an active military, and I have 3 young children and a family. So, but it's very difficult because you feel helpless. You want to go back. All my friends, they're in my old unit, they're in Miluim in reserves, and they're all being mobilized. But after a few days, I realized that the situation became a little bit clearer, that there was no need for more soldiers. In fact, from the reserve call-up, they received 150% of people who were called up. In fact, I have a friend who lives in Samaria, and he told me, we don't have enough, essentially it's extra large bulletproof vests for, his words, not mine, the fat rabbis to wear. And so really there's no need for extra people, and really there's a need for gear and honestly donations, which is really one of the best ways you can help if you're not actively going back. And so I did that. I was in touch with the guys from my unit who are now in a reserve unit, and Israel's very unique. You're able to donate if you want to, specifically to given units. It does not just to some large fund, that goes into some black hole of the IDF. You can actually donate to individual units, and that's what I did. And I certainly encourage all of you to donate in any way that you want, or however much you want, to any charity that you guys feel is worthy of your donations. And so I saw so many parallels and similarities from Tzuk Eitan to now, and I think maybe I'll leave it to you guys to ask me questions if we want to get into it more about perhaps some of the strategic, tactical mistakes of the past and how they led to the things that are happening right now, that happened on October 7th. Things that happened with the kidnapped hostages. These are, of course, very difficult questions. These are the hardest questions. In the Middle East, you really don't have any good choices. The option is between a bad choice and a worse choice. And those are what's presented in front of us now. But I think I'll leave it for the Q&A if you guys want to ask me about that. I'll leave you just with one thing, that when we had a ceasefire with Hamas in 2014, they of course violated it. And for those of you who don't know too much about the military or war, there are things called rules of engagement, certain things you can and can't do in response to certain actions. And so if you have a ceasefire, it completely handcuffs our forces to the benefit of the enemy, because they didn't sign the Geneva Convention. They don't care. They showed that not only on October 7th, but numerous times before then in the past. And so that ceasefire with there were a few hostages. They claimed they had taken Israeli soldiers who were alive. It turned out that they were just their corpses. The point being is that they are at the end of the day a terrorist group with a worldview whose central concept is the destruction of Israel, and we must keep that in mind so that we don't make the same mistakes over and over and over again that we did in the past, because they seem to compound as we go into the future. But I'll leave the rest for the Q&A if you guys would like to ask me anything else about that. I'll hand it over to
Fran and I were in Jerusalem on October the 7th, which was probably the safest place to be in Israel, because Hamas's rockets are very inaccurate, and all they would have to do is to send a rocket that lands in East Jerusalem, which is basically Arab, or hits the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and that would not serve their purpose at all. It was Simchas Torah. We were at services, and the sirens went off. And in Israel, they take sirens seriously. And we went down to the shelter to continue the service. And we danced with Torah scrolls in a very circumscribed area, which was the safe place. And no one at that point knew the extent of what was going to happen, what was happening. And part of it was the Israeli press was not going to say everything that was going to happen until they knew what was the impact that this had on Israel. Number one, the shock to know the technological sophistication that Hamas had developed. They were able to disconnect communications, to delay the IDF from coming to the scene for a matter of some hours while they did their terrorist work. So the first thing was the underestimation of the sophistication of Hamas. Second thing was the crisis of knowing that the Mossad and the Israeli intelligence blew this one. And Israelis trust the fact that the IDF can protect them and that the Mossad is on top of the situation. And they weren't. There was a delay of some hours, and during the delay of some hours was the time that the terrorists did their work. So here you are in a small strip of land, surrounded by enemies, and trusting the fact day by day that you're safe. And that got blown out of the water on the 7th. The next thing is, okay, you hear rhetoric, the rhetoric of Hamas, the brutality of the attack just was overwhelming. It's one thing that Hamas attacked military installations and about 400 soldiers were killed. That's war. Beheading babies is not war. Killing people who are at a music festival is not war. Killing parents and taking their 8-year-old child out from under the bodies and holding that child as a hostage, that's not war. And so we have the combination of these things that we underestimated Hamas's ability, planning. They were planning this thing for over a year. The failure of intelligence and the fact that the army could not get there in time to save that many people, and the utter brutality of what went on has shaken the people of Israel to the core. Someone told me, for example, of a woman in the IDF who attended 8 funerals in one day. Our granddaughter, who is a member of the IDF, had to stand guard at the funerals of young children and cope with that. And it goes beyond that point. The settlements that are close to the border had to be evacuated. And so you have hundreds and hundreds of people that can't go home. Our nephew lived in a village right up against the Lebanese border. Those villages have been evacuated. So there are thousands of people that cannot go home. The fear of escalation is very great. The forces, the terrorist forces in southern Lebanon, possess over 100,000 Iranian rockets that can reach anywhere in Israel. And they are far more accurate than anything that Hamas has. Hamas sort of shoots it in a general direction, and a lot of them don't go where they're supposed to go. One of them, by the way, was the one that hit the hospital in Gaza City. Israel was accused of sending that rocket. It turned out it was an errant rocket from Hamas or one of the other terrorist groups. The terrorists in southern Lebanon have over 100,000 Iranian rockets with a range that can hit just about anything in Israel. How do you live like that? How do you live with the fear that at any moment it's all over, that the invasion will overwhelm? Now, Israel, in a sense, has lived through times where the odds were against it. From the very beginning, War of Independence, no one would have bet on Israel coming out of that at all. The 73 war, the Yom Kippur War, they were surprised and yet managed to survive. So that constant terror, that constant apprehension. If you go to a city like Kiryat Shmona, which is well within the range of rockets from southern Lebanon, there's a small plaza in the middle of the city. There are 3 tanks that were captured from Syria. They have painted them one blue, bright blue, one bright yellow, and one bright red. And children play on the tanks. And frequently at night, they sleep in bunkers. How do you raise your children like that? How do you raise your children like that? Now, I make a comparison because we're here 6,500 miles away. We get the news, and by the way, a lot of it is distorted because they rely on Hamas sources, and Hamas lies through its teeth and for propaganda value. But suppose you lived in New Jersey, and suddenly 2,000 rockets headed for New Jersey from Delaware. And there was a threat from New York that had 100,000 rockets aimed at your cities. And there was an invasion, and 44,000 people in New Jersey were slaughtered. How would you handle it? This is the everyday reality. And people try to live a normal life and go through a normal day with the possibility that at any time the word will come out that those rockets from southern Lebanon are headed for Haifa and Netanya. That's the situation in Israel. So I want to give you just that feeling of what is going on there, of how to live a normal life with that hanging over your head every day.
I want to thank each of you for sharing your stories and your experiences with us. So thank each of you for doing so. I want to open it up for questions. We do have a microphone up here. I will ask if you want to come up, grab the microphone, and then ask your question. You can sit back down. If you want to make a line, you can. Otherwise, you can just take one at a time. So while you come up. And if you want to ask specific questions, you can ask any of them specifically, or you can ask generally and they can respond.
Point of information, at the music festival and the proximity of the music festival and the time being hit and the mashallah, I mean, I've been to Israel, and I know it's small, but I don't understand from the festival where it began, am I right? And,
Not exactly.
or did they have an army,
Yeah.
the people going to the mashallah immediately? I don't understand that.
So there's always, the fog of war and exactly who gets it first and how many. It's still, it's difficult to know exactly. But so there's a phrase in Hebrew, Otef Aza. It's like Gaza envelope. So there's communities dotted all along the length of Gaza, the longest side of this border with Israel. There's kibbutzim, there's moshavim, there's all kinds of other kinds of communities. Re'im is like 40 kilometers, like from the Gaza border. Okay, but these guys are not on foot, right? These guys are on trucks. They're moving, 40 kilometers. Or what is it? 30, 20 something miles. You can cover that, doing 80 in a few minutes. So it's a multi-pronged attack from really the entire border that Gaza shares with Israel, in addition to rockets as well. So the whole thing going on at the same time. There's some debate as to whether or not Hamas knew beforehand that the music festival in Vain was going to be like a main target, or if it was just an ad hoc sort of decision as they were coming in. Either way, it seems to me that they knew about it because they flanked the entire partygoers in their escape routes. But to answer your question, basically, it's just all at the same time. It's a multi-pronged attack. We're talking about thousands of Hamas soldiers, and on their heels are coming thousands of civilians, essentially, from Gaza. In sort of, wave necessarily. You know, all the civilians, they see what's going on, they hop on their donkey, they hop on their moped, they hop on foot, whatever, and start going, right? It's a big party. And so it's hard to know, exactly. There are indications, which kibbutzim die for. Essentially, besides Re'im and Ofakim, which were like clear targets, Ofakim is the largest city that's farther away. Essentially, your proximity to the Gaza border was basically how quickly you got hit. Near Yitzchak, where my brother lived, where I lived, it's meters from the border. Their fields are, it's right there. The fence is right there. Nachaloz, same thing. Be'eri, same thing. I mean, you can get there. I mean, I don't know if you saw the pictures. There's a bulldozer going right through the gate, right? And so that's maybe not so short of an answer.
There's a wonderful resource called Mapping the Massacre. So what they did, an Israeli tech company took all the information about all the kibbutzim, all the people that got hit. So it's literally devastating, showing you the line of massacre throughout. If you go, you can learn about each kibbutz, how many people were kidnapped, how many people were killed, were murdered, their names, their stories, their pictures are over there too. And it's also show you the geography of the area in a very multi way. So I really recommend going. It's mappingthemassacre.com.
I'll send the link to the right.
And I think that that's something that could very visualize. And I don't know if you have a map of Israel, I can go and show you where it is. But just to answer this question, I personally think that they did not knew that the party is happening there. There actually were two parties. I have friends that been in Leim party, and there was Sekaidek, was a very small party next to their Re'im kibbutz on the other side that was not really official, so not a lot of people knew about it, but they also have casualties and hostage from there. They came with food, they came with equipment for days. So, and they had maps of different cities in Israel, and one of them that was found was Tel Aviv. I mean, I'm very thankful that they didn't have enough time to go, but they were on a route to Beersheba. And Ofakim, which is far away from the border, had 50 casualties and a lot of people that were kidnapped, and stories that we heard about the police in Sderot, the battle that was there. But like even a week ago, they still found a terrorist in Rahat. They found a terrorist in Beersheba. So we have no idea how many terrorists came to Israel that day. They could still be there planning their next attack, God forbid. And so I'm sure they're going to investigate that, and we will know more as we go. But I think that there were so many, unfortunately, so many pieces of this puzzle that are slowly, we learn about what happened. There's a unit in the IDF that's Bitanio, that they're on the eyes of the IDF, and they're sharing what they saw, and they were prepared for that for more than 2 years. The farmers that came to farm the land next to the border, to collect data, people that came to work for Israelis in those kibbutz. They had very detailed information about how many people lived in every house, if they had a dog, they didn't have a dog, if people live with them, if they have businesses, and it's their intelligence was very eye-opening how much they knew and how much they use, I guess, the resources that were for them from the kind heart of people that lived in those kibbutzes and moshavs and cities in the area.
Other questions?
I want to make one comment about psychology and how people deal. If I told someone that they had a condition and they would have a leg amputated next Tuesday. Most people can cope with a crisis if they know the dimensions of the crisis. But if you don't know the dimensions of the crisis and you live with the uncertainty, we don't deal with that very well. The hostages lived in darkness for 50 days without knowing whether they would live or die. We don't cope with situations like that very well. And the news is going now talking about the fact of what kind of psychiatric, psychological help are going to be given to these people who lived with that uncertainty. And you can imagine 50 days in darkness, not knowing whether you're going to live or die. That's real stuff. If you're the family of someone and you don't know if they're going to live or die, there's going to be a price that's paid. And there's another question. In order to get the hostages back, we have to have a ceasefire. What is Hamas going to be doing during the ceasefire? This is the real world. This is not the ideal world. You want the hostages back, that's the price that you pay. The uncertainty of the cost down the road of giving Hamas another 7 days or 10 days to make their plans. So there's this ongoing drama that's going on. It's not over. It's not over. And Hamas very cleverly is drawing out the hostage question. Now, I will say one thing which I think Israel's playing has read its Machiavelli and has done some planning along this line, that apparently Israel has taken more people into custody than will be released by the deal with Hamas. And I'm not sure that the Israeli government has gone ahead and said, you want to release the prisoners? We're going to take a bunch more prisoners so that we have people that we can release in order to get the hostages. This is what I think the Germans at one point called realpolitik. This is the real world. And in the real world, you don't always behave as if this were a game of chess. It's more complicated.
I don't want to go too far down the wormhole of politics in Israel, but obviously we've spoken about the very severe intelligence failures that you can blame back to the government. You had a government that had created a constitutional crisis in the country that clearly had caused distractions. We don't know where Netanyahu is going to be a year from now and where the government is going to be a year from now, but do any of you want to step into that minefield as to what's the future of the government and where the blame lies? And I know people say we're going to be time to talk about that. Very long answer.
Just for those watching on live stream and might not have heard, the short version of the question is, what is the future for the Israeli government?
I think there's a few things that I would like to address. First thing, the society in Israel was very divided in the past few years. There was an ongoing internal debate about the future of Israel, the laws, the share of budget, where do we put the money of the government, what community do we find about different corrupt in the government. This has been, in my opinion, not a JCC opinion, this has been the most terrible government we have ever seen in Israel. Unfortunately, the people that in power not necessarily care for the people in Israel. They care for the personal seat. They care for internal good, and they don't serve the public as they should. And I think that part of it is because people have been in their position for many years and haven't been replaced. And I think that at that day, I don't know if you know or you heard or you read in the news, one of the reasons, they're probably going to investigate and hear more about it, but most of the forces that were staying usually in that area were transferred to the West Bank to protect Sukkot in the West Bank, specific event that was going on. And that's one of the reasons that there were not enough forces in the area to react. And obviously, the amount of people that came in and the different area that they fought in, and the brutality and the amount of armory that they brought with them, they had a lot of weapons. They had a lot of grenade that they used, and there were no rules of engagement on their side. Everything was kosher, unfortunately. There were things that, and I'll quote my mom, that even the Nazis didn't do. And very unbelievable that a person could do that. So that's one thing. And I think the second thing is that as we go in this war and as we are dealing with the hostage, they just transferred a budget yesterday that still supports the more religious communities in Israel, despite the humanitarian crisis, despite the needs to support people that were ripped from their homes and the entire economy that is not functioning right now because everyone is in war, there's no schools, all the businesses are almost not functioning because people are not going and buying or exchanging things. So I think after we'll finish with this operation, the war, and hopefully it won't be short. It will probably take time until they're gonna bring back the security, the trust of the public in Israel, in the government, in the IDF, in the special forces. But I'm sure that we will go to election after this. And then you can tell by the way they're even negotiating right now that some of them are acting in order to reserve their spot in the next election. So I don't know what the future will hold. And you know, in Israel, unfortunately, we went to too many elections in the past 5 years. And none of the government were able to hold more than a year in the past 5 years, which is ironic because going to election, it's cost a lot of money to the economy in Israel. But there have to be some changes. And I think the people that going now and supporting and raising their voices and will rise up from the destructions and will demand a different leadership. At least I hope.
The Israeli government, such as it is, no one political party has a majority. They have to form a coalition. And to this point, only the forces on the right were able to draw together a coalition. Now, when Hamas threatens, everybody forgets politics, and the only thing that's important is survival. So at this point, there are no protests against Netanyahu. Basically is, let's take care of the situation and get back to something vaguely resembling normal. After that happens, you're going to see this political jockeying again, where small political parties bargain with the majority party, or if they get out, there's another election. I mean, this is what's been happening. There was a cynic in Israel who said the following: the Arabs, the Palestinians, Hamas is really stupid. Let them declare peace and watch the political parties tear each other to shreds. That's probably more cynical than most people would like to go, but look, here in this country, we are such a narrow majority between the two political parties that one or two people can sway the whole deal. And we are facing a level of vituperation like we have never seen before because the balance of power is so narrow. So we can look to our own situation and our own vulnerability. That's what we have in Israel, where there's no majority, and they have to form coalitions, and you have to get into bed politically with people that you don't necessarily respect very much.
So you asked a lot of questions. You asked about 6 or 7. About Israeli politics have always been dysfunctional, as most parliamentary democracies are. Forming coalitions, they're always precarious, nobody has a majority, it's only a plurality. They are what they are. It's very similar in many ways to British democracy. And certainly the politicians act in political ways. That's what they are. In terms of the intelligence failures, I think that's for people who have intimate experience with these types of things. When this happened, I was like, it's simply not possible. You have to understand that's if a cockroach moves on the fence, they get the whole battalion to move. And for 1,500 or however many, over 1,000, 2,000 Hamas guys to be bulldozers and trucks with machine guns, it's not to be believed. On all of Israel's borders. So I did our unit. It was a little bit of a special unit. We did counterterrorism operations on the Lebanese border, on the Syrian border, and Judea and Samaria after the war. And of course, I did a conventional war, essentially, in Gaza. So whenever you're doing operations on either side of the fence, you're talking to soldiers, usually girls, who are manning, all kinds of sensors in a room, usually hours away. We see this, we see that, go investigate this, go investigate that. I'm giving them information. Everything that moves. The sensors are so accurate, they can tell the difference between a human being and an animal. So for something this large to move, it's not a failure on a low tactical level. It's much higher. And you can take that sort of failure and apply it to every part of the military. Aman, military intelligence, Shabak, signals intelligence, right? So you listen to every phone call, everything, every email these guys send, you listen to everything. So at the highest levels, they actually decided, let's stop devoting resources to listening to Hamas. They're not going to do anything. What are they going to do? You shoot some rockets, we're going to respond with an air attack. So there's this idea that is called in Israel conceptia. So it's basically a bastardization of the English word concept, conception. So they had one after during the Yom Kippur War. And the conceptia during the Yom Kippur War was, Egypt's not going to attack us. They got their butt kicked in '67. They're not going to attack us without advanced Soviet weaponry. And Syria is not going to attack us by itself, meaning without Egypt. So no one's going to attack us. Meanwhile, on the Bar-Lev line, on the Suez Canal, they get reports every single week. These guys are doing this. They're moving huge columns of troops. They're doing this. They're getting fire hoses. So you have this contradiction in essentially the ideology of the top brass, in military intelligence, everything, and what the guys on the ground are actually seeing. So we saw lots of their movement, right? And they were chattering on with signals intelligence for this for over a year. They were funded and trained by the Iranians. So really, and I think the head of the Shabak, Shahut Bitachon, like essentially the National Security Service, was given the day before was given some reports. This is, seems like some big movements going on. Don't worry about it. He didn't give the report to the Prime Minister.
Is that Ben Gvir?
No, Ben Gvir is a cabinet minister. We're talking about the head of the Shin Bet. And so you have this disconnect between essentially conceptia, an ideology of the top brass, and what the actual grunts on the ground are seeing. After the Yom Kippur War, there was an Agranat Commission. It was essentially a commission to see what went wrong. And believe me, there's going to be one after this war as well, and Hezbollah. The same way they did after Yom Kippur War. Politically, in the security apparatus, in the military. And so, you really, it's hard to tell what's going to happen because we're in the middle of the story right now. Things are changing day to day, things are changing week to week, not just in Gaza, but also regionally. You have Houthi rebels in Yemen, supported by Iran. They're attacking Israeli assets, essentially, in the Gulf and in the Straits. You have Hezbollah on the north. You have actual Iranian troops in Syria. And everyone's watching. So you can very quickly have a very, essentially, what seems to the world's small conflagration develop into something that's regional. And so that brings eyes and that brings pressure. So you asked a lot of questions. I hopefully I answered at least some of them.
I want to shift focus to this country and what our role might be 6,500 miles away. There's a lot of garbage that's out there which is very prejudicial and inaccurate about the situation in Israel. The poor Palestinians that we have blockaded and not allowed ships to come with penicillin to Gaza City. Why is the blockade there? Because along with the penicillin would be rockets from Iran. In a strip of land that's 5-6 miles across and 25 miles long. Can't let the borders be porous because the Iranian rockets are much better. And systematically, we have to go ahead and confront the false images that are coming out. What are the risks of a two-state solution? If a Palestinian state were autonomous and could import weapons freely, we need to go ahead and confront the false image of Israel. Now, Israel not perfect, that's not the question. But a bunch of slogans that are coming out. It's one thing to go ahead and to see people march in support of the people of Gaza who are under attack. That's fine. But as soon as you see some nice middle-class college student marching around with a banner that says, "From the river to the sea," we have to get active. We can't stay passive and allow that to happen. So we have a role in 6,500 miles away in dealing with what has occurred.
Other questions?
when you hear the newscasts, they'll say something that makes you feel really badly about Israel, but then they'll end every newscast with 14,000 Gazans have been killed. But I understand from what I read that about 70 and maybe more Israeli soldiers have been killed. And I think if you figure that out according to population here in the United States, that would be several thousand. But you never hear about that. You don't hear anything about the Israeli soldiers who were killed. And what can we do to get that more known on the news? The news, I think, is very biased. The computer, and I listen to NPR in my car, and I think all the news is very biased.
The figure of 14,000 has been provided by Hamas, so you can't trust it. I understand it. Some of the better newscasters have said, we get this information from Hamas, and we cannot corroborate the figures that we're getting. So that's the best that we have. But Hamas has been putting out these figures, and obviously it has propaganda purpose.
So I think you asked a very good question, because for the past 20 years, Israel really did a good job in advocacy, and Hamas mastered this campaign of propaganda, keep sharing false information on social media, especially TikTok, to a level that today, if you go to this social app, they're admiring Bin Laden. This is their new hero. Most of the kids that marching in university has no idea where Israel is on the map. They have never heard, they don't know what Hamas goal are, what's the mission of purpose, what are they doing. They don't even know the history of the wars that happen in Israel. And a lot of the information they're spreading and the videos about kids are dying, or it's acted. I mean, I've seen so many videos since the operation started of them staging bodies and staging kids using AI applications to create a picture of a poor child that is crying in front of destruction. And unfortunately, the casualties, there are casualties, but the casualties are because Hamas don't value the lives of their people. And will Israel say, they delayed going into Gaza. They send allowing time for Gazans to move to the southern border part of Gaza. And they're operating on the north side, creating a humanitarian area, providing more than 200 trucks came in the past week to Gaza, bring medicine, bring even incubator for babies. And unfortunately is that Israelis care more for the lives of the Palestinian than Hamas. And even, none of the Arab countries opened their borders for Palestinian. And all the people that will march in the streets, they did a very interesting article in an Israeli media, acting like they're Palestinian, calling, asking for aid for all the country that says they'll open the border. But actually they're not. None of them are willing to accept any immigrants or asylum coming from Gaza. They're showing to the world that they care about them. But the real question is, they're just against Israel, because we've seen in Iran, in Syria, and other countries devastating death and killing and murder, but nobody showed up and speak up. And only when Israel is defending itself, because there was a ceasefire on October 7th, and Israel keep going and going and trying to create peace in the region, even with countries that we'd never thought about, to try to create an area where we could live in some sort of balance and a status quo in the region. I was a teenager when protesting against the disengagement from Gaza. I've been in Gush Katif. I've seen what happened, how the area was before Israel gave it back to Gaza in a hope to give them a state so they can control the fate of their people. But unfortunately, they took it, this beautiful place, and destroyed it and created terrors and tunnels. And instead of investing in education, instead of building hospitals that can serve their people well, and I feel for the Palestinian people, but at the same time, I ask myself why those people are not rising up, why those people not looking for a different solution, why are they voting for the Hamas? Why? And we saw a lot of civilians that came and stole things and destroyed places and took cars and took TVs back. They were not just terrorists. There were even civilians that come in and, well, people were dying, taking their entire houses and then setting it on fire. So you ask yourself, why there's so much hate?
Yeah, so essentially you're asking about media sources and accuracy. And you can pretty much count on most mainstream media sources, certainly in the United States, certainly, definitely in Europe, to be biased. They're going to take numbers from whoever fits their ideology, their perspective. The BBC, Reuters, NPR. So they'll get a Hamas number. Yep, that fits our narrative. Boom. Really, in terms of trying to get accurate information, the best thing you can do is to get multiple sources. You can learn Hebrew and just watch the Israeli news in the morning. That's probably the best thing to do. There are a lot of English language versions of the Israeli newspapers. There's plenty. Look them up. They're fantastic. We can maybe provide some of those resources in the webpage.
Or you can go to the JCC website and get updates that we get from the State of Israel and through our national organization. And as I said, it's updated daily, and you can get through there for information that is accurate. That people will make sure that it's accurate and based on information, so you can be safe on that.
Well, the other thing you mentioned, sort of in the same vein, talking about how we have 70 Israeli soldiers die, how come nobody talks about them? So, a couple of things. So, Hamas knows all of this. They play the information and the propaganda game very, very well. They play the West like a fiddle, okay? They know exactly how to play on our value system and push on the pressure points. Oh, our poor civilians. Okay. And so that's what you'll hear about in the Western media. And you're not going to hear about that. Well, a soldier, it's a war. Soldiers are dying. Okay. It's not going to garner any sympathy in the Western media. Civilians dying certainly will. So they play that very well. Again, the IDF and the Israeli government, there's not the options between a good choice and a bad choice. It's between a bad choice and a worse choice. So it's a very bad idea to go into a crumbled urban area and try to clear it. It's extremely difficult to do in any kind of way where you're limiting your side's casualties. The IDF has done a fantastic job. I would argue probably one of the best jobs ever in urban combat warfare. Despite that, you're going to have military casualties, and don't expect any pats on the back from the amazing job that the IDF does in limiting civilian casualties on the other side. the opposite. Things like Tzlil just mentioned, and so really I wouldn't sit around waiting for ideologues in Western media to get an accurate view of what's going on when it comes to Israel. That's never going to happen. So the same thing, the same dynamic that exists in the UN. It's just not going to happen. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have hasbara. Doesn't mean we shouldn't explain what the truth is in our position. We absolutely should. But to be a good advocate for Israel, you have to be well informed. To be well informed, I would say you need a few different media sources. Some provided by some of the Jewish organizations here, and also Israeli sources. Not to say that I swallow everything the Israeli sources say, completely. Obviously not. But it's a start. So I think if there are any other questions.
Any last questions? Maybe one more?
Yes.
So this is a hard one, so I'm sorry in advance. So I will explain and lead with full transparency. I'm not Jewish. However, I'm a Jewish ally. I studied Jewish history. I'm an academic. I work with the community, and it's confusing for someone who's not Jewish. I understand because I spent 10 years studying Jewish history, how important Israel is, how important it is in the Middle East, how important it is to Jewish people. I have learned from a rabbi history, and I've been educated. But most non-Jews don't even come with that perspective. So how do I be an advocate to non-Jews and wrestle with what I'm hearing in the media without understanding fully as well? So it's very difficult, that push-pull thing. You're in a very difficult situation. What do you advise in that respect? Yes.
So just to rephrase the question for anybody who may not have heard it, and tell me if I mess it up at all. That how do we advocate to the non-Jewish world who, for us it's easy because we're Jewish and we value Israel, but how do we advocate to the non-Jewish world who might not be as educated or as knowledgeable about Israel and its importance in Jewish life?
Yeah, I think you've done a good job yourself of sort of establishing the base, which is to be informed yourself of the history. It's a very long history, complicated history. So you can start at really whatever starting point you want in Jewish history or the state of Israel. But I think that's the first thing is being informed yourself, which you've already done, and encouraging others to do the same. In terms of being an advocate, I really would say just different people respond to different things. There's a huge base of evangelical Christians in the South, especially, extremely pro-Israel. They respond to religious sentiments. Certainly, they would be interested in the historical facts of the founding of the state of Israel beforehand. But what moves them is religious sentiments, as you might expect. An academic, maybe an actual factual historical perspective. So regardless, I think being informed about Jewish history and Israeli history is really the way to go. And there's a lot of good resources that aren't tomes and encyclopedic volumes that one has to go through in order to understand the conflict, I suppose. That's sort of the short answer.
I think your path is not terribly different from the path of Jews in the United States that have to figure out what sources to go to be informed. Fran and I had an interesting experience a few years back that we went to a meeting that hosted the mayor of Ariel. Ariel is how many, 30,000, something like that, in the middle of the West Bank. And we thought we were going to be among our tribe there. And it turned out there were about 700 people there, and we were the only Jews. And this group was sending its young people to Ariel for camp over the summer, and they were absolutely and totally committed. So I think what we have to do is we have to affiliate with our friends and inform them as much as possible what is actually going on. And those friends are out there, and they're not only out there, but they're in here. So we need to affiliate with people who feel a deep sense of commitment to the state of Israel for any number of reasons. The group that we were in, they announced, we don't want Jews to convert to Christianity. We need you to stay being Jews. That was a very welcome message. And there were 700 people in the audience. So we have allies out there who have studied and are committed, and they are out there. We have to find them and affiliate with them. So, I mean, that's the best. Let me say this. What do we have to contend with? We have to contend with people on the far left who, out of their liberal bent, will always side with the people that they consider to be the underdog. And in this fight, they consider that Israel is the Goliath and the Palestinians are the David. And we have to deal with that. That's some people on the far left. We have to deal with some people on the far right that don't like Jews. It has nothing to do with the state of Israel. So we have a job to do with our brothers and sisters. And we have to do exactly what you've done, which is to get them to the sources so that they can get an unbiased picture of what's going on. That's our job.
So with that in mind, if I can ask one more question. Rabbi, you were with me when we went to visit some friends of mine at an attorney's office not long ago. The rabbi was with me, and I have close friends there, all of whom support Israel and support what is happening. And a friend of mine there in that office said to me, you are not alone in this. You have friends in this community. You have friends who will stand up for you if we have a place to do that. But there have been no pro-Israel rallies in Birmingham. We've had some solidarity rallies, but it's all Jews. We have not opened up ourselves to anything that allows that public to surround us. There may be reasons for that I don't understand. So we have, to your point, Barry, and to all, we have affiliates who want to bond with us. And our answer to them, I said to her, well, when you went to find out what you could do, because she contacted some local Jewish entities, and all they said to her was, we just need money, make donations. And she's like, we need to do something. We need to stand in the street with a sign. We need to make phone calls. We need to somehow connect with you. Can you help me figure out how to do that? So I don't know what that answer is. And we're talking about getting our affiliates, getting the information out there. I know that some people may be talking to some of the churches. That's like one or two people trying to cover a whole bunch of stuff. How do we invite our community to stand with us in a way that is safe, that can help us build those connections. And y'all, I don't expect you to have the answers, but it's something that we need to think about, because from their perspective, the Jewish community in Birmingham has been silent, and they don't understand it.
Well, I'd like to add that non-Jews are confused. We're really confused.
They don't know what to do.
We also don't understand, because what you said with the media, what is happening, what it looks like is happening in Palestine is morally, we're scared of that. It looks bad. But it's often because people don't understand. And so, can we have some kind of education? How do you get that to people? It's confusing.
It's a good question, and first of all, I'm sorry. I'll be happy to hear later who told you that. Who told you that the only way you can help is by giving money? The reason that there hasn't been a rally is because of security reasons. Unfortunately, there's no way that they can securely let Jewish people, that's sad, be standing on the street holding flags. And that is the reason that it hasn't happened. But I do invite your friends to hold a solidarity event in his church or his business or his group. And I personally went with several other colleagues to 75, 100 people, evening that we come together to do exactly what we did here: provide perspective, answer questions, educate about the history briefly, and we are going to others that are scheduled. And most of them are not publicly announced because of security reasons, and they always have a guard at the end. I don't think the solidarity event was only for Jewish people. It was held at the JCC and was open to the public, but you had to RSVP because of security reasons. Unfortunately, we're in very dark times where, like, more than 400% of anti-Semitism just jumped in since October 7th. And their violent incident, a Jewish man was killed in a rally in LA. This is not an easy situation. Trust me, I would love, and there's so many Jewish leaders that would love to stand on the street with a flag, and I'm sure there are see people shaking their hands and saying yes, to stand with a flag, protest, hand signs, and there's a lot of conversation about it. That I was involved, asking the same questions. Well, we're not doing this, how can we do that? But I would love to talk to your friend and bring an event that we can educate and let them have a space where they can ask questions about Israel and about what we hear about Palestinian people in Gaza, in the West Bank, and why the media is so biased. It's confusing because the anti-Semitism, it's more politically correct to be against Israel than against Jewish people. So you won't hear things about Jewish people in the media, but you hear things about Israel. This is the new anti-Semitism tactic. And I will just end with just share knowledge, just help people, educate. Contact us. I have some business cards that I'll be happy to give to people. Reach out to us if you don't know how to say, or if you have a group of friends that would like, just even in your home, we would love to come and meet you, bring you to the JCC if needed. If you don't have a space to hold this event, we can help you with that. Thank you.
So I know it's getting late, so I want to wrap us up a little bit, but traditionally in rabbinic thought, you never end on a negative note. You always end with a nechamta, something comforting or a positive note to end on. So I'm giving you guys about 1 to 2 sentences of a nechamta for everybody to end on kind of a hopeful note.
Yesterday, a 48-year-old man walked up to 3 Palestinian students and shot them. One of the things that we need to do, and we've done this in various places, is to show that we will not tolerate Islamophobia, just as we will not tolerate attacks on the Jewish community. And there have been communities in the United States where Jews and Muslims have gotten together and made statements that lead to more peaceful interaction. And we need to be aware of that as well. We can't just go ahead and look at the one Jewish man at the protest who was hit over the head. We also need to look at the 3 students who were shot for no particular reason and join with the community together to protest hatred.
Okay, a positive note. I would say that Israel has suffered many challenges and overcome them in the past, be militarily, even spiritually, spatially, physically. But we've always managed to overcome. And I think this is no different. Israeli society specifically is extremely dynamic and extremely united. And sort of the polarization that you saw maybe a year ago from a lot of the political, or less than a year ago, for the political reforms, judicial reforms, a lot of that's by the wayside now. And all Israelis are united in one single common mission, which is to defeat Hamas and to bring back all the hostages. And when you get the entire Israeli society united on one goal, you really can't stop them. So I think we will overcome and we will be victorious.
And this history of Israel in crisis, unfortunately, it's not new. And we're about to celebrate the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem, and a holiday that brings a lot of light. So what I invite you is to celebrate being Jewish, being proud. And I don't think I've in my life wear so many Star of David on myself, and my house is ridiculously decorated for Hanukkah. But I think this is one way that we can show our friends that despite everything that happened, we're Jewish, we're proud, we will prevail. We're gonna overcome this terrible thing that happened to our people, and it's important that we all stay together and united in our support to Israel, standing up for hatred and racism and anti-Semitism, and help our friends come to us, to come together with us in this. And I just wish you a very happy Hanukkah.
Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of you for coming to hear us today. Wishing you a happy Hanukkah again, and keep your eyes out on the newsletter for all the wonderful events we have coming up. Thank you.
Thank you very much.